COINTELPRO, where they had targeted thousands and thousands of people for investigation based on no violation of the law.
But the fact that the United States government of America would call in 2 mafia people to help us eliminate some guy illegally by murder because we disagreed with him is the kind of thing we were confronted with almost across the board during this investigation. The major part of what we covered was activities against American citizens in this country. And it was very extensive and beyond what most people even realize today.
Yes, I think we were all surprised by the magnitude and the depth of what we saw. If I can just say this, we need a strong FBI. We need a strong CIA and an NSA. We have enemies, and we have to deal with them. And every one of us wanted to make certain when we got done, that part was not compromised and indeed enhanced. But I was chairman of the domestic task force, and we were looking at agencies that dealt domestically, not just the FBI, but the Army and many other agencies that had become involved in one way or another. And when we got into the records, and ours was the only committee probably that's ever looked at a complete, unprotected files of the Bureau and these other agencies with virtually no restrictions on us at all, sending staff and experts into those files. And when they started coming back, I remember once he said, "I can't believe what I read today." And he'd gotten into COINTELPRO, where they had targeted thousands and thousands of people for investigation based on no violation of the law, just hunches and suspicions, where they were tracking down Martin Luther King, who had committed no crimes, but they were tapping him, they were covering him, they were on his case all the time, and they were trying to dismantle him as a leader of the civil rights movement. And there were many, we'll go into a lot of other things, I'm sure, before the night is over, but the fact that this could happen in America, this nation of laws and accountability, and happen over so many years. Presidents of both political parties were involved in this. It was a bipartisan thing, and there was a lot of this that the agencies had to explain that were the result, directly or indirectly, of pressure from above. Yes, we were surprised.
It was the first time ever in the history of the country that any group ever sat down and looked at the entire intelligence operation of our country at the same time. There was one senator who was reported to by the Intelligence Committee on what they were doing. And he kept it to himself. No, I was amazed when this first idea began to come that we ought to have an investigating committee. I talked to several of the veteran senators, and most of them said, "We don't want to know. I don't want to know what the CIA is doing. I don't know what our intelligence committee is doing." Well, that was fine until these revelations began to come. So the real impetus didn't come from any senator who said, "Well, it's time for us to launch a big investigation." It came after these stories appeared and the people in the country began to wonder what is going on. A survey was taken, and by a percentage of 62 in favor versus 18 against, the people said that there should be more oversight of our intelligence operations. And from that point on, we began to address that problem, and that's why the intelligence committees were formed.
We established through the facts that there had been overreaching by the intelligence community and improper guidance by presidents all the way from Franklin Roosevelt through Richard Nixon. Many people thought when we started it would just be more if Nixon was a bad person, and there was plenty of that was uncovered. But Roosevelt started it off by loose language in authorizing the FBI, and all of the others did things that were bad. Another thing I think that's important about the Church Committee is it asked the right questions, and I think the two fundamental questions were, should America adopt the tactics of the enemy? It's a question of today also. But that was a real issue, and we concluded it shouldn't, but there had been a great deal of adopting those tactics by our secret government. And the other major question was, should the American people be allowed to know what the facts are? And the whole, our work was entirely devoted to helping the American people know what the facts are. And the final thing in the sort of this opening, the Church Committee, as both of you said, it's important to have a strong FBI and a strong CIA. The question is, what are they going to do? And taking the FBI, Roosevelt started them off in the wrong direction by asking them to investigate subversion, a word that has no content and has no limits. And subversion was the excuse of investigating and attempting to destroy Martin Luther King, for example. Well, in our final reports, we said what the FBI should be doing is looking at espionage and terrorism, and there we were a little ahead of the times, looking at espionage and terrorism instead of subversion.
We've now had FISA in place, the law you referred to, for, 25 years?
Yeah.
I think almost many attorneys general, many FBI directors, many CIA directors said that these laws work very well. They were able to do what they wanted to do. The idea behind getting a warrant was not to hold back law enforcement officers from doing what had to be done, but making certain there was a judge there just to be sure that they didn't go beyond what was legal and right and appropriate, and because of the history we had seen. And so I believe there's this constant debate, which we hear today, that if you obey the law, you're weak. That there's something that the founders of America did that intentionally made us impotent in the face of our enemies. I don't think that's true at all. The Constitution, the laws, the power of the Congress, the President, under the law, gives us the full panoply of power that is needed, both in secret and in public. But it does it without allowing human nature in a position of unaccountable power, which, when not observed, we found to our despair time and time again over American history, there's something about us that we tend to do more than we should if we're not being watched.
The key to the Church Committee was developing the facts, because if you don't have the facts, you don't know you can't know the truth. And statements, general statements that are made by administration officials then or today, often are devoid of real facts. And taking the NSA, it was a perfect example of a phenomenon that we saw all the time, which is if you have a program, a intelligence agency's program, that may start out with a narrow and rather valid purpose. And the NSA started getting every single cable that was sent overseas for a quite valid purpose, which was to be able to obtain and then decode encrypted messages that were being sent by foreign embassies. And nobody's going to think that's a bad thing to do. But what happened with the NSA happened with all the other agencies, that because they were immune from any oversight, because they believed what they were doing would always be secret, what started small expanded from the acceptable to the unacceptable. So NSA, starting with looking at the encrypted messages of foreign embassies, ends up looking at the messages by anti-Vietnam War protesters in this country and civil rights leaders in this country. And that's a perfect example of mission creep. It shows why you can't rely on generalizations coming from people defending their programs, but find out what the real facts are.
It's a bipartisan bill that goes to the agencies, ask them, what do you need now? What kind of changes in this 25-year-old law do you feel you need to allow you to do what you must do to protect America, but still do it within the law, still have some accountability? And that law has about 14 different points, all of them reasonable. Sure, we should adjust it. Sure, we should make it work. But we have a big stake as Americans in guaranteeing that our system of constitutional law is sustained. Every big power that was around when America was formed decided its future was to be found in some kind of imperial, magisterial power with no rights to the citizens. We started with the idea that this would be a government of the people, by the people, and under the laws of our country. Read the oath of office of the president. Read the Constitution. Read the Federalist Papers. We wanted a government that was accountable. And that has made America, I believe, more than anything else, the greatest and the strongest nation on earth. And we lose something when we take lightly this idea of constitutional and legal rights of our people.
I think we believe, and people that look at it believe, that the weapons are there, the procedures are there to deal with virtually any kind of situation we're confronted with without violating the basic First Amendment rights of the people of the country.
It's an issue of checks and balances as well as an issue of the First Amendment rights. I mean, they're both equally important. But what's being debated right now is a really radical position that the current administration is taking. Their position is that the United States President has the right to break the law if he thinks it is important to do that. Now, that is not the way our country was constructed. It was not constructed to set up a monarch. In fact, we revolted against the English because we didn't want a monarch. And even the English had abandoned the idea of the king having the right to break the law in 1689, almost 100 years before our revolution. So the thesis that's being tested right now is totally radical, an enormous departure from American culture and law, and extremely important that it not be sanctioned by the Congress or accepted by the public.
I wanted to bring up the issue.
Please check out my other video, What the FBI Did to American Citizens is Beyond. It has more on the church committee, this footage and other stuff. And also subscribe.